We got breaking news related to Jean Carroll. She should be getting her $5.8 million off of Donald Trump, which reflects the judgment by a jury that she was sex abused by Donald Trump, defamed, and he owes her punitive damages from over 3 years ago because an emergency stay sent in by Donald Trump late last night to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals was denied. That means that Lewis Kaplan, the judge, his order of disbursement to disperse the cash deposit, cash bond that Donald Trump put up 3 years ago, that's been running with interest for $5.8 million, that should get dispersed today. The only thing left for Donald Trump to try is to throw a Hail Mary hand grenade into the United States Supreme Court that just rejected him about 2 weeks ago, 9-0 without dissent. He's been trying to appeal to the United States Supreme Court that judgment since last January. And 13 times the United States Supreme Court, including the MAGA 6 that he effectively appointed and controls, said, yeah, no, pass. We're not going to let you appeal this to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court has the right to set its own docket and decide what appeals are going to come up to it. You need 4 out of the 9. He controls 6 of them. He couldn't even get the 2 people accused of sex abuse in their lifetimes, Clarence Thomas and Brett Kavanaugh, to side with him. I'm sure they didn't want to resurrect stories about their own sex abuse. So 9-0 without dissent. They said, no, we're not, you're done. That's the last stop on the train. And based on a prior order by Judge Kaplan, setting up the cash bond, as soon as all appeals were exhausted. I mean, we're all exhausted, but as soon as the appeals were exhausted through the United States Supreme Court, payment gets made. Donald Trump said, well, but wait, I filed a motion for reconsideration. You know how many times in the history of the United States Supreme Court, after they've rejected a petition 13 times and issued their final decision of rejecting the petition without dissent, how many times they've decided to rehear it? 0. So this is not happening. This isn't even Dumb or Dumber. This isn't even, so you're saying I have a chance. He has no chance. Judge Kaplan, in his order, which I'll read to you for a minute, said there is no chance. My order is clear. The money will go to Jean Carroll through her lawyers today. And if you somehow, some miracle of miracle, you somehow get the Supreme Court to reverse the judgment about the first Jean Carroll case, not the one about $83.5 million, I'll talk about that in a minute, then you can go after her and go get the money back. See, Donald Trump doesn't want to do that. He said in his filing, and I'll read it to you, but Judge, she's going to give away all the money. He says at the bottom of his opposition paper that he faces unrecoverable loss. That's his irreparable harm. The plaintiff has repeatedly stated that she intends to give away all the funds that she collects from him. And once those funds are distributed to third parties, it'll be hard to recover. So what? It's time to move the money to the other side of the ledger and let Jean Carroll have her foundation to help other women that she has said she's going to use the money for. I'm Michael Popok, you're on MeidasTouch and Legal AF. I take this personal. We've been supporting and defending Jean Carroll's right to be heard as a survivor since the beginning. I've had Jean Carroll on and interviewed her. I've had Robbie Kaplan, her lawyer, on and interviewed her. In fact, I'm surprised that in the filing by the Trump side, when they said she's going to give away all the money, they didn't refer to my interview with Jean Carroll in which she said, I'm going to give away all the money. I'd rather have a plate of fettuccine and help other women with a foundation. I'm not driven by money. Play the clip.
I agree. Well, you have just named 3 cowards, 3 women who have been so dimmed by money. They can't see what is happening. They cannot see it. They have an inability to see what's actually going on. And I hold them partly responsible. All 3 of those women could have acted, but none of them are. It's tragic. It's tragic that Ivanka is not doing anything, and neither is her husband.
Well, they've profited mightily out of this, haven't they?
You know, what is money? You know, if I get the $83 million, I'm going to give it away to basically to women to try to get the 50 years of our rights, which they took away, try to get those back. Money is not that. All it is stuff. I don't understand the drive, but I'll be giving that away. You guys can help me.
Where does the case stand right now at this
Yeah,
point?
that's what I wanted to know.
Well, Michael, what do you think? Take it away.
I think the two appeals that he's tried at the Second Circuit, based on the panels, including Judge Chen, who I know pretty well, they've rejected him. He's not going to be able to assert immunity, which was waived by Alina Habba and others a long, long time ago, and a long, long time ago, as referenced in the back-to-back oral arguments that Robbie so successfully argued in the last month or so. I don't see the United States Supreme Court, even this MAGA right-wing court, being that interested in events that happened when he was Citizen Trump, when he attacked you and defamed you at all. There's only one event or one series of events that happened when he was even president, which was the defamation after the fact. I just don't see this court in a civil matter having given him carte blanche in the criminal world, even they bailing him out and trying to do anything to undermine your judgments. That's my opinion.
I concur.
Looking good. It's looking good.
Yeah, I like that.
Does Robbie or anybody else give you a timeline on how this is going to work out or when?
No, but we have a foundation already set up, lobe and lobe, by the chair, Rachel Harris of the State Department. We've got the foundation ready to go. We're just waiting for the money, and then that money is going to be given out.
I know Ben, my podcast partner, was trying to convince you not to give it all out.
Yeah,
you mentioned something about he wanted to see you have it.
No, I don't need it. You know what? I'm 81. I know money doesn't make me happy. Adventure, going for a walk with the dogs, having a great fettuccine Alfredo. That's the stuff that makes me happy. I don't need a bunch of money.
You can see there I joked with her a little bit because Ben Meiselas, my podcast partner and friend, said, I want her to keep some of it. I said, no, she's got a plan. She's 83 years old. She's got a plan what to do with her money. And as a sex abuse survivor, she has every right to decide what to do with the money. It's hers. How did we get here? Yesterday, the judge issued 2 pieces of paper, one in order to the clerk to distribute the funds yesterday to Jean Carroll. And then later, he issued a 4 or 5 page order to explain why Donald Trump needs to pay up now because equity demands it. Let's start with the order. I'll post all of these pieces of paper in Substack for Legal AF for you to read. Order directing disbursement of deposited funds, signed by United States District Court Judge Lewis Kaplan. Here's what Lewis A. Kaplan writes. He first gives the recitation of how we got here, that the appeals are now over, and that the stipulation said once the appeals through the Supreme Court are over, she gets paid. Now, therefore, it is hereby ordered. The clerk is respectfully directed to disperse the value of the principal judgment, which amounts to $5 million, from the court a bank account to the trust account of Kaplan Martin, which is Jean Carroll's lawyers, Robbie Kaplan and others. And that the clerk is also directed to disperse the value of the post-judgment interest. We've calculated this. Trump has calculated it at almost another $800,000, so it's $5.8 million. Well, Trump didn't like that. And he certainly didn't like the memorandum and order regarding it that accompanied the direction to the clerk. See, the judge wanted to keep the lines clear, the margins clear, color within the lines, give a very simple direction to the clerk. But here's what he had to say about Donald Trump, and enough is enough. Memorandum and order regarding motion came out yesterday as well. More than 3 years ago, Judge Kaplan wrote, a jury returned a verdict against defendant for $5 million for sexual abuse and defamation. The judgment was appealed. The defendant, Trump, posted a $5.55 million with the court. That was the money judgment, the money bonds, to secure payment of the judgment. In due course, that judgment was affirmed on appeal by the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals denied rehearing it en banc, meaning he tried to overturn the 3-judge panel to try to get all of the 20 judges or so active in the Second Circuit to hear the case, and they denied it. They would not hear it en banc. Then the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, on June 29th, denied without any dissent defendant's petition for a writ of certiorari, because none of those judges, including Kavanaugh and Thomas, wanted to be heard on the matter of a sex abuse case or be associated with it. Plaintiff has now moved for disbursement of those funds, and the defendant has resisted, saying that there's a possibility that the Supreme Court might change its mind on a decision they just made 10 days ago and grant his petition for rehearing. It is, again, never happening, and the judge knows it. Plus, he says, it's all theoretical. My stipulated order says as soon as you have filed your stipulation and it has been your petition for writ of certiorari, your request for appeal at the Supreme Court, and it's been denied, she gets the money. What happens after that? You can go chase her for the money. And he ends it this way. In the last analysis, this is on page 6, defendant has been stalling this case for years. A jury unanimously concluded that he sexually abused and defamed plaintiff and awarded her damages accordingly. The judgment on that verdict has been upheld on appeal. En banc rehearing has been denied by the Second Circuit. The Supreme Court has denied cert without dissent. It is time for him, Trump, to do equity and pay the judgment. Trump didn't like that. and he complained about, I won't be able to get the money back. And he lobbed in last night a late night motion for emergency stay to block the order of Judge Kaplan to disperse the funds, which would be today, to E. Jean Carroll. And the Second Circuit came back with its decision. Here is the decision. We'll put it up on the screen of the Second Circuit. Appellant moves for an immediate administrative stay of the district court's July 8 order authorizing disbursement of deposited funds held in the court's registry, while the court considers his forthcoming motion for a stay pending appeal. So he says, I'm going to get a whole big brief in about why I'm entitled to a stay, and give me an immediate administrative stay right now, or the money's going to go to her today. It is hereby ordered that the motion for administrative stay is denied, and citing the stay factors that are not present. He doesn't have irreparable harm. He can always get the money back if he wins, and no one believes he's going to win. What happens next? He'll try to lob a hand grenade, a hot potato, Hail Mary, into the United States Supreme Court that just rejected him 10 days ago, and try to get them to stay, which means they're going to have to take a look at whether they would grant reconsideration of something they just, and I want to make this clear because Kaplan didn't do it in his order. 13 times since February, they've met in conference to consider this petition and other things and had rejected it. They couldn't find 4 votes to call up the appeal, let alone 5 votes to rule in his favor. And then they finally killed it with the final nail in the coffin. What is the appeal even about? It's not about immunity. This is a civil case anyway. This is about Donald Trump defaming her and sexually abusing her before he was president. This is about whether Lewis Kaplan, the judge, let in properly certain types of sexual misconduct evidence of his past, that Donald Trump sexually assaulted 2 other women, one a People magazine reporter, another a woman on a plane. And that all came in. The Access Hollywood audio of him saying he could grab a woman by her genitalia and get away with it came in, which is allowed to come in under the federal rules of evidence related to sexual misconduct allegations. You're allowed to show conformity, that you have a little bit of an MO, if you know what I mean. And so that's all they're arguing. The overwhelming amount of evidence that was presented in days of testimony, including by E. Jean Carroll, unrebutted, uncontested. Donald Trump didn't even testify. It wasn't a criminal case. He could have testified. He couldn't have been criminally prosecuted. He didn't have a Fifth Amendment right, but he chose not to. And she won 9-0. 6 men, 3 women on a jury. Now, what's happening with the other case? She also tried another case that went second. And in that case, Donald Trump did testify. And he walked out the door during the closing argument. And he was commenting and trying to influence the jury and got almost sanctioned by the federal judge a number of times. And the jury hated him and believed Jean Carroll in all of her testimony for him continuing to defame her when he was president of the United States the first time. She's not my type. She's ugly. I would never. She's a liar. He was already adjudged to be a sex abuser. Now the question was defamation and punitive damages, and they awarded her $83.5 million, now up to $90 million with interest. He had to post a surety bond. He had to get an insurance company, a surety company, to put up the bond because he didn't have the money at the time. I think he had to pledge his Wells Fargo account or his or one of his accounts in order to do it. That is, again, he went all through appeals, two levels. Well, in that case, 4 levels of appeal. And he exhausted all of his appeals and lost. And he went over to the United States Supreme Court with another stupid petition, which is still kicking around in there. And I think it's going to end up the same way. You know, they may have granted him unlimited criminal immunity, but not civil immunity for something he did in which he sexually abused a woman in a dressing room and then lied about it and defamed her from the Rose Garden. Now, so that's still, I think, early last quarter 2026, first quarter 2027, she's going to get that $90 million. It's going to go to her foundation, as you heard. Back to the $5.8 million, the next stop on the train after the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, if he tries to get it into the United States Supreme Court, is Justice Sotomayor. She sits as the duty judge over the Second Circuit in New York. She can just reject it on her own. Like, no, denied. I'm not sure she sends it over, and I don't think she should, to the full panel. I think she should deny the administrative stay. I think look at the body of work she's standing on. They just ruled 9-0 against him with no dissent. I think she can confidently stroke a pen that says denied. Denied. And they can try to lob it in another way. I think that's what she should do. I commend her to do that. I want her to do that. We'll follow it here on Legal AF and on the MeidasTouch Network. I'm Michael Popok. Come over to Legal AF YouTube channel, hit the free subscribe button. Come over to Legal AF Substack, where all of these pieces of papers I just talked about are there for your reading pleasure. Until my next report, I'm Michael Popok here. When life changes in an instant because of an injury or the bad acts of another, you need fighters in your corner. The Popok firm is dedicated to helping the injured and their families get justice and the money they deserve. And we don't back down. Contact us today and let's start your fight for justice together.